Hi, I'm Rick Reef. Welcome to SoCal Insider. It's crunch time for the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare. The enrollment deadline's here, and healthcare officials and community groups are scrambling to sign folks up, especially Latinos, whose participation is vital to the health of this historic program. How's that going? And in the San Fernando Valley, a new effort to combat an old problem, prostitution. We'll examine those stories. But first, a new battleground in the fight over immigration. David Nazar, what's the story?
Rick, as you know, the Republican Party stance on immigration reform has cost it big time with Latino voters. However, we're seeing a political shift. One of the biggest beneficiaries of the Latino vote, President Obama, is himself being targeted by angry Latino activists, and Los Angeles has turned into ground zero for this assault, with a 30-year-old immigrant civil rights organization leading the charge. Latinos have been one of President Obama's most loyal and game-changing constituencies. They have supported him mightily at the ballot box, helping him win the White House in both 2008 and 2012. And Obama has responded to Hispanics, promoting things like housing and health care initiatives they like, and calling for humane immigration reforms that contrast the tough stance drawn by many Republicans. While hopes for comprehensive immigration reform fade in the GOP-led House, a strange thing is happening. The anger and attention of many Latino activists is shifting from Congress to the White House. They are turning on the president over what they call his deplorable deportation policies. Nowhere is the outcry louder than in Los Angeles County, home to about 5 million Latinos. That's about 1 in every 10 Latinos in the U.S.
I don't think anybody believed that we would be having a conversation with the President of the United States, President Barack Obama, on 2 million deportations in this country. That was something that I could not imagine. It was something that nobody who supported him in the Latino community could imagine.
Angelica Salas is executive director of CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles. CHIRLA is one of several Latino groups at this news conference to protest the administration's record number of forced deportations. Salas says candidate Obama promised immigration reform. However, she and other activists say President Obama hasn't done nearly enough to prod or work around a deadlocked Congress. And even more galling to these critics, the forced deportations, just under 2 million in Obama's first 5 years, nearly as many as in all 8 years of his Republican predecessor, George W. Bush.
The system just does not work. And if more money and more effort was put into the legal framework of our system and less on kicking people out and keeping them from coming in, we'd have a system that would be much more fair, more humane.
President Obama seems to be listening. The president recently met with members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus and asked the Department of Homeland Security to see if immigration enforcement can be done more humanely within the confines of the law. That may not be easy, though. Homeland Security says about half of those being deported have criminal records. However, this LA news conference underscores how inhumane many Latinos believe the current system is, and how disappointed they are with the president, saying he lied to them and betrayed their community. Yolanda Muniz is an immigration activist in Anaheim. Muniz is a U.S. citizen and explains her brother, who is not a citizen, is being threatened with deportation.
I don't know why they don't like us. I don't know why the government don't like us, or I don't know what happened, because we're not doing anything criminal here. We're just working, or we're trying to do better citizens, going to school and try to do what the law said that a good citizen has to do. I don't really understand what stopped President Obama to do something in our favor. Like me as a USA citizen, I vote for him not only once, I vote for him twice, because I believe in his word and he's not doing anything.
Isabel Medina, who lives in East LA, says that she and her husband are undocumented workers in this country illegally. Medina says they're honest, pay their taxes, and just want a better life for their children. However, she says they live in fear of being deported and losing their kids.
They're my life. I mean, it's the most precious thing that I have. I cannot tell you what, I mean, I cannot even imagine what would I do without him. President Obama has the power to stop deportations. He has the power to give us some relief. He lied because he promised that the first thing in his agenda it will be immigration reform.
Joe Hicks has a much different view of U.S. immigration policy. Years back, he ran the L.A. Human Relations Commission and even worked with Angelica Salas and Chirla. Then, Hicks says he underwent a political conversion from left to right. Now he runs a think tank called Community Advocates and contends immigration is devastating to places like the inner cities of South LA and South Central, in part because he says it prices many in the African American community out of jobs. Hicks says the outcry over deportations is a political ploy.
I've never heard this level of rhetoric. National Councilor Raza calling Obama the national deporter-in-chief. The rhetoric seems to ratchet up. They clearly are targeting him with kind of extremist language I frankly have simply not heard before. So it's an interesting juncture. So there may have been some decision made within the ranks of these groups to target the president, target the administration, to see if in a sort of a lame duck period they can extract some new concessions from them.
Is he a fair target? Are these folks being deported when they shouldn't be?
It's unfair to compare what they've been doing with the Bush years because, frankly, they aren't deporting all that many people. So, you know, the rhetoric, I think, is unfair in terms of them saying the deportations are at some extreme level. We're being victimized, we being the legal immigrant community being victimized at rates we've never seen. It simply is not so.
Angelica Salas says it certainly is so.
Right now, we have a system that protects neither the undocumented or the U.S. citizen. It's a system that has created 2 million deportations and that has put a really dark spot in our history. We're going to look back at this and we're going to look at it and we're going to say, what did we do to all these children who were orphaned because their parents were deported? Those U.S. citizens are going to really demand from our country an apology, because that's what we've gotten to. There has been no other system in the history of the United States other than slavery that has created a systematic breaking up of families, of children being taken away from the hands of mothers. And I think that it has to stop.
And listening to what Angelica Salas just said, it really seems an understatement to say these activists are angry and simply ratcheting up the rhetoric. Rick, are you surprised in what you heard that she likened deportation policy to slavery? Because, you know, we really haven't heard that kind of talk before from the LA Latino activist community. They've really defended President Obama.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not really surprised at the rhetoric itself, but I am surprised at how it's being directed at President Obama and the just the vociferous level here. I think it does show, though, the frustration of the Latino community with what's, you know, it looked like they were going to be getting, that immigration reform was finally going to happen. It hasn't. It appears that with this election season now, neither political party wants to make immigration an issue in the elections, so it's sitting there. So I understand that kind of frustration. And I mean, the human costs, which, you know, your piece brought up of children and parents, you know, or let's say a parent having to make that Sophie's choice. We're being deported. Do we take the kids with them, or do we leave them with a relative here in the United States? Just the toll of that. But, you know, David, there are certain analogies and words that you shouldn't use in politics. And as awful as some of these situations are, I think it's, I wouldn't go to say it's slavery. I think that's going just a little too far.
Yeah, it's interesting you echo the same sentiment as Joe Hicks, who you saw in my story. I mentioned Angelica's statement to Joe, and Joe said he was extremely offended by that. And he simply said as well, you just don't liken things like that to something that's incomparable like slavery or the Holocaust. But he was very offended by that statement.
Yeah, David, did you reach out to the Obama administration in this story?
In fact, I did. I sent the White House press office a very detailed email on exactly what the Latino folks were saying and what we were covering, and I never heard back from them.
Yeah, it's also, I should say that I also contacted Homeland Security and didn't hear anything back because I wanted to understand some of these numbers. I think it should be noted, viewers might be wondering, well, how can it be at record levels? And then a guy like Joe Hicks says, well, they're not deporting as many as they did under Bush. And the reason is, the devil's in the details. How do you interpret these numbers? And what's interesting is some people are saying that if you, what's happened in the last few years is they're counting it differently. And people who get stopped right at the border and turned around and sent back are now being counted in those numbers where they weren't in the past. And that if you peel those numbers out of there, the Obama numbers look very much like Clinton, Bush, and maybe even a little lower. But that Obama, it seems, his administration has used the higher numbers to combat critics like Republicans who say he's not doing enough. So now he's caught in a vice. Now, does he go to the Latinos and say, well, I really haven't been deporting that many. I was lying about the numbers. So he's in a tough political situation, and different people are interpreting the numbers differently.
I mean, it really was, from Obama, a double-edged sword. He may have pacified some in the Republican Party for a while. However, as you saw in the story, he has enraged the Los Angeles Latino community.
Excellent report. Thanks very much, David. And now, joining me for their views on the immigration issue and other stories, Mundo Fox 22 reporter Annabelle Munoz, Norberto Santana, editor-in-chief of the investigative news agency Voice of OC, and from the Inland Empire, reporter for the Press Enterprise, David Olson. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Annabelle, this is a story you've been following. What's your take on this?
There was something that really caught my attention. It was a great report, by the way, is that this term hasn't been used before, but it has. I mean, I've noticed it as far as deporter-in-chief goes, relating to President Obama. I've heard it for at least a year or more. The difference is that now it's the NCLR, the National Council of La Raza, the largest Latino advocate organization in the country, and one that has really stood by the White House despite these deportation numbers. So that kind of makes this attack a little bit stronger and really caught the attention of many more people. But the reality is that there is over 1,100 deportations daily. We see these cases when we cover them in our news organizations, and there's a mandate that requires that 34,000 beds are filled daily at immigration detention centers. So these detentions and deportations are happening every day. And
you know, we heard Isabel Medina, that one woman there, who's saying that Obama has the power to do something. Does he have the power to do something?
Well, I think that that's a perplexing issue, because the White House constantly says that he doesn't, that he needs the support, and that he can't do something like he did with deferred action for undocumented students or undocumented youth. But there's still that accusation that he can absolutely do something to stop these deportations, something.
Yeah, Berta, what about that? He does seem like Obama has done things with executive orders, taking criticism from some people, saying that he's being an imperial president, you know, as with these, with students and things. Is he doing everything he can?
No. The problem, the main problem with this deportation machine that our political system sort of geared up over the last decade is that in some ways it's a very difficult machine to turn off. And in some places, as Annabelle mentioned, in places like Santa Ana, Anaheim, Los Angeles, we see the impacts on the street every day in terms of it takes resources away. It complicates issues like insurance sign-up because there's distrust of any government worker. It makes law enforcement tougher. The city of Santa Ana wants to shut down a jail that it has, but it cannot because it has a contract with ICE. The sheriff's deputies in the county of Orange depend heavily on the budget of the ICE detainees to keep that department from having to undergo massive cuts. And so there is a sort of an investment that has arisen over the last decade in this deportation machine that in some ways it doesn't matter who's in charge. It's like a huge ship that to turn it is not an easy thing, even by executive order.
Yeah. David, in the Inland Empire, you know, the Latino community is not monolithic. People have different, you know, different views, different backgrounds, different perspectives. How's this issue playing out in the Inland Empire?
I'm certainly hearing a lot of that frustration as well. The idea, especially in recent months, and one thing Annabelle brought up is when Janet Murguia from National Council of La Raza called the president deporter-in-chief a few weeks ago. When I was speaking with activists in the last several months, there was a lot of criticism of National Council of La Raza and other inside the Beltway groups for not being strong enough against Obama. So I'm guessing some of that statement may part stem from some of the grassroots pressure on the national groups to be tougher with Obama. But I've been certainly hearing that frustration for months, where people at this point are like, look, it doesn't look like there's going to be immigration reform this year. border. These folks are being deported in large numbers. We need to do something to stop it, and I think that's what's helping lead to these very strong comments against the president.
Annabelle, is it ironic that the Republicans were so much on the defensive, particularly in blue states like California, and now is the pressure off?
The pressure isn't off. I think there's a shift in the pressure for the time being because the deportations are still happening, because the community is living in constant fear. And like Norberto said, there is that pressure on halting deportations right now because there is so much fear. I speak to a lot of people who are afraid to come forward if they have any information about a crime because they're undocumented, who sometimes won't even speak to me when I have a camera and a microphone, even if it's not relating to immigration, because they're so afraid. And I think families are focusing on not being separated, but still not losing sight of immigration reform for the most part.
Okay. Norberto, another story covered California, or you know, California Obamacare, if you will. We are now at the deadline. Latinos have been a huge target of people to sign up. How's that going?
Not well. As Annabelle mentioned, efforts like signing up people for health insurance run directly in the face of a large deportation machine. So how in the world do you expect as a government to go out into Latino neighborhoods who have now been trained to shy away from any sort of government program, government worker, or any other sort, and expect to have large-scale success? Now, here in Orange County, we've had large success with programs like what they call the Promotora program through a group called Latino Health Access that uses Latino women, largely moms, to go to next-door neighbors and communicate that way. It's sort of a more civil society approach to doing that. It seems to be working well. However, it runs into the same problems. The Board of Supervisors here in some ways cut that program because they were uncomfortable about the use of Spanish words. So we keep running into the same problem. To me, it's really not much of a surprise at all.
Yeah, David, Norberto talked about this, you know, kind of this person-to-person effort, and there's been a lot of criticism of the how the state has tried to get Latinos to sign up. And that I think even now they've signed up half as many, you know, as they really expected to, right? It's something like 22% of those signing up are Latinos, where they wanted 50%. Did they just kind of blow it in how they marketed this?
Well, you know, I talked to folks from Covered California a few weeks ago for a story on that and how Latino enrollment is a lot lower than expected. And they acknowledged they made some mistakes. There was too much emphasis on signing up on websites and by telephone. And now there's general agreement that, especially in the Latino community, in part because of these trust issues, Norberto talked about there needs to be more forums and other sort of events in Latino communities, both in English and in Spanish. There needs to be more working with Latino organization and other grassroots organizations to have that higher level of trust, so it's not seen as exclusively this government sort of program. So you have sort of the seal of approval from grassroots groups, and they have said, they've told me at least, they've stepped up those types of activities, more grassroots sort of activities, and the numbers are lower than they'd like still, but just, I think it was a week ago or so, they released some new figures showing that about 32% of people who signed up, enrolled in Covered California in the first 2 weeks of March were Latino, and that compares to 18% the last 3 months of the year. So it seems like they're having more success, but it's still not where they'd like to be. The percentage of the state's population that's Latino is 38%, and 46% of folks eligible for subsidies under Covered California are Latino. So
it's not just those that are eligible for subsidies, but Norberto, in part it's because the reason there's such a push to sign up Latinos, not just because many of them need the coverage, but because they tend to be youthful, healthy, working, and they're going to put money into the system. Are some of them just saying, hey, just as many young people are, this doesn't look like a good deal for me?
Well, I mean, I'm sure that as consumers, there are some that are probably looking at it and asking themselves a question. Again, many people in that community have been trained to simply go to emergency rooms over the last decade. So again, I think that you have this continued problem of the deportation machine makes bringing these people into the sort of mainstream of anything challenging.
Just really quickly, I know that when I'm out in the field, I'm constantly reached out to by the community when I'm working on stories that maybe aren't related to the Affordable Care Act, and people say, can you tell me more about Covered California? What is it? Where can I call? I've never seen a phone number. And the subsidies are a concern because most people think they may not qualify. They don't really know what those numbers look like. And just piggybacking on what Norberto said, there are families of mixed immigration status. So if there's one U.S. citizen, one permanent, legal permanent resident, and an undocumented family member, they don't really want that interaction because they are concerned, even though I do have to say I have heard the ads and the information being released by Covered California to make sure that immigrants know that that isn't a fear they should have.
Yeah, Annabelle, another story you've been working on is this crackdown on prostitution in the San Fernando Valley. What's that about?
You said it perfectly well at the beginning of the show. This is an old issue. This is something that has been going on for a long time. We're very aware of it. But just a few weeks ago, local authorities in the San Fernando Valley had a press conference, including Councilmember Nuri Martinez, LA City Attorney Mike Fewer, LAPD, and a nonprofit organization. They're basically saying we're going to try a new approach. We're going to be a little bit more aggressive. And they're focusing on two specific areas, Van Nuys, Sepulveda Boulevard, and Lankershim Road in Sun Valley. So they're going to assign two specific police patrols to focus on these areas and really put their attention on finding the pimps, on finding the men, the people who are soliciting the services of sex, and also the women who are working in these areas and kind of reaching out to them through the nonprofit and through the local authorities.
Yeah, is that a new approach, bringing these nonprofits in?
I think what's new is that on the patrol there will be a social worker from the Mary Magdalene Project. So in the past they said we have worked with them, but there hasn't been someone present in that moment to provide information for women who are victims of sex trafficking. Now we're going to have that person with us during that time of patrol. So I do think that's a little bit different. And there will also be diversion programs also for men who, or anyone who is suspected of paying for sex, where they will have an 8-hour class, learn about the dangers of sex trafficking, speak to victims of sex trafficking, and when they finish, they may have the charges dropped if they don't commit the offense again. Okay,
David, quickly, one more story. You guys have been writing about at the Press Enterprise, the Great Bull Run, bringing the running of the bulls from Spain to the Inland Empire. What's that about?
Well, there's a Boston-based events company that has proposed a bull run on the 21st of June, and it would involve about 24 bulls and steer and about 600 people in front of them, basically. And it has gotten mixed response. The county has not received an application yet, and they said there would be concerns about public safety and traffic and crowd control issues such as that, and also the promoters have already been sued by 2 animal rights groups who say that this could do harm to the animals.
I would imagine anything like that will run in opposition from the animal rights groups. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, whether they get the green light or not to do that. And finally, Norberto, hey, I want to congratulate you, Voice of OC. You've made it.
4 years. We've on Monday is our 4-year anniversary. 3,500 stories. We recently just got a grant from the National Night Foundation. We're part of about 24 nonprofit newsrooms across America. That
Very good. It's the trend. Nonprofit news organizations. Congratulations.
Thanks.
You can watch this show and past shows at rickreef.com. Segments of the show can also be viewed at pbssocal.org. My guests have been Annabelle Munoz, Norberto Santana, and David Olson. And a special thanks to the folks at Churla and to Joe Hicks. And thank you for watching. We'll see you again on SoCal Insider.
SoCal Insider with Rick Reef is brought to you by the following. 5 Point Communities is a proud sponsor of PBS SoCal. 5 Point Communities is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. More information available at www.fivepointcommunities.com. Snell & Wilmer is a full-service business law firm with more than 400 attorneys in Orange County, Los Angeles, and throughout the West. On the web at swlaw.com. Snell & Wilmer. Straight talk, sound counsel. Practical solutions.
Relief Pod's latest generation of safety kits now go everywhere you go. Relief Pod's organized, color-coded, and compact safety kits keep first aid and emergency items accessible for a safe lifestyle every day. Relief Pod. Live ready.
A healthy future for you, your family, and your business is why Memorial Care Health System transformed healthcare. Our hospitals, physicians, and outpatient centers keep patients healthy and care for them when they're not. Memorial Care, one healthcare system leading the way.